The noon sun hammered down on the Arizona desert like molten iron poured from the sky. Out in the middle of nowhere, beside a dried-out cactus, lay an Apache woman, her legs useless, her face carved with pain. Her name was Ayanna, and her own people had left her there to die. 3 days earlier, the tribe had broken camp and ridden on. The shaman, Nantan, had spoken the words no one dared question. Since the battle against the Bluecoats, since the bullet shattered her spine, the spirits no longer walked beside her. She had become a burden. Out here, the desert had only one rule: the weak did not survive. Ayanna did not cry as the last shapes of her people disappeared into the horizon. She had learned long ago that tears did not change fate. They had left her with a half-empty water skin and a knife. She knew exactly what that knife meant. It was a choice, the only honorable one left. But Ayanna wasn't ready to use it. Not yet. Above her, vultures had already begun circling, patient as death itself. She watched them with a quiet mix of contempt and acceptance. "Not yet, black brothers," she whispered in Apache. "I'm still breathing." By the second day, the thirst became unbearable. Ayanna rationed every drop of water like it was gold. Her lips cracked, her tongue swelled, and the world around her began to blur. Hallucinations crept in like ghosts. She saw her mother, Sani, braiding her hair. She saw her younger brother, Takai, chasing rabbits through tall grass. She saw herself, young, strong, a warrior running free through the mountains, bow drawn, legs swift as a deer. Then she would wake, and reality struck like a hammer. She was paralyzed, abandoned, dying. The irony cut deep. Ayanna had once been one of the finest trackers among the Red Sky people. She could follow a rabbit across bare stone, read the clouds like stories written in the sky. Now she couldn't even stand. The third day came wrapped in an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. The water skin was empty. Ayanna picked up the knife with trembling hands, watching the blade catch the ruthless sunlight. It would be quick. She had seen many warriors die. She knew exactly where to cut. Closing her eyes, she began to sing the death song her grandmother Tala had taught her. The words scraped out of her dry throat, rough, broken, but still carried a haunting beauty. It was a song for the brave, for those who chose their own ending. Then she heard something. At first, she thought it was just another illusion, but the sound grew clearer. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Her eyes snapped open. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, racing toward her. 6 riders broke through the shimmering heat of the desert. Cowboys, white men. Ayanna tightened her grip on the knife. She would rather die by her own hand than suffer whatever those men might do. Stories of what cowboys did to Apache women ran like blood through her people's memory. The horses stopped, forming a half circle around her. The men stared down from their saddles, some curious, some disgusted, one almost pitying. Ayanna stared back, pride blazing in her dark eyes despite the dust on her skin and death closing in around her. She was Apache. She would not beg. "Well, look at this," one of the men said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "A crippled Indian. Best leave her, boys." "She can't even walk," another added with a laugh. "Ain't worth the trouble." The man who had been silent finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, different. "She's hurt. Alone. Hell, Colt Hayes, there's 1,000 hurt Indians out here," the first man sneered. "You gonna pick up every last one of them?" Colt Hayes swung down from his horse without a word. He was tall, his face weathered by years under the sun, his eyes the color of a storm rolling in. He stepped toward Ayanna, slow and measured. She raised the knife, ready to drive it into him if he got too close. "Easy," he said, stopping at a careful distance. Then he glanced back at the Dust Riders and spoke words that shifted everything. "She's mine now. The Apache nobody wanted." Episode 2. The Lone Cowboy. The silence that followed hung heavier than the desert heat. The 5 cowboys stared at Colt like he'd lost his mind. One of them, a thick-built man with a scar across his cheek, Wade Cutter, let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Yours, Colt? Sun must have fried your brain. That girl ain't good for cleaning stalls." "Didn't ask for your opinion, Wade," Colt replied, never taking his eyes off Ayanna. She still held the knife, her gaze burning with confusion and suspicion. This white man was different. There was no hunger in his eyes, no cruelty, just something she couldn't read. "Colt, be reasonable," another younger cowboy said. "We gotta find those lost cattle from Henderson's ranch. We can't haul around a cripple." "Then leave," Colt said, stepping closer to Ayanna. "I'm staying." The men exchanged looks. They knew Colt. He was the best tracker among them, the fastest draw, and the most stubborn man alive once he made up his mind. Wade Cutter spat in the dirt. "Fine, your funeral. But when Silas Kane hears about this, don't expect us to back you up." He kicked his horse forward, and the others followed, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Colt dropped to one knee in front of Ayanna, keeping his hands where she could see them. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly, clearly. She didn't answer, but her grip tightened around the knife. He sighed. "Look, you can stay here and die, or you can come with me. Your choice." He gestured toward his horse, a sturdy chestnut grazing nearby. "I've got water, food, a place to sleep." Ayanna waited in silence. The sun was already beginning to fall, but the heat still burned. Her water was gone, her strength fading fast. This man could kill her, sure, but death was certain if she stayed. With him, there was at least a chance. Her grip loosened just slightly. Colt took that as enough. Carefully, he reached for his canteen, unscrewed the cap, and held it out. The sound of water sloshing inside was like music. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before snatching it and drinking desperately, the cool liquid sliding down her throat like salvation. Colt waited until she finished. "Can you move at all?" he asked. She shook her head. From the waist down, her body was dead weight. Colt nodded, studying her. "I'm going to carry you. If you try to stab me, we both go down. Understand?" She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, unexpectedly, she nodded. The knife slipped from her hand and fell into the dust. "I've got water, food, a place to sleep." Ayanna weighed his words in silence. The sun was starting to sink, but the heat still clung to the land like a curse. Her water skin was dry, her strength was fading fast. This man could kill her, sure, but if she stayed here, death was certain. With him, there was at least a chance. Small, fragile, but real. Her grip on the knife loosened just a fraction. Colt Hayes caught it immediately. Slow and careful, he reached for the canteen hanging from his saddle and unscrewed the cap. The soft slosh of water inside sounded like heaven. He held it out to her. She hesitated only a second before snatching it, drinking hard, desperate. The cool water slid down her cracked throat like a blessing from the spirits. Colt waited, patient until she finished. "Can you move at all?" he asked. Ayanna shook her head. From the waist down, her body was nothing but dead weight. Colt studied her, thinking it through. Then he nodded, All right, I'm gonna carry you. But if you try to stick that knife in me, we both go down, and neither of us walks away. You understand? She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, unexpectedly, she nodded. The knife slipped from her fingers and hit the dirt. Trust. It cost her everything she had left. Colt lifted her gently. She was lighter than he expected, worn down by hunger and days under the sun. He set her carefully onto his horse, then climbed up behind her. Ayanna stiffened as his arms came around her to take the reins, but he kept his distance, steady and respectful. My place is about 2 hours west, he said, nudging the horse forward. Just hold on. The ride passed in silence. Ayanna watched the land drift by, rock formations she had known since childhood, cactus lines that marked invisible borders only her people could read. She kept wondering what this man really wanted. Nobody did something like this for nothing. Maybe he was worse than she thought. Maybe he was taking her alive for something far crueler. But as the miles passed, she began to notice things. The way Colt guided the horse gently, avoiding rough ground so she wouldn't be jolted. The way he stopped every so often to let her drink. The low whistle he carried under his breath. Soft, almost sad, fading into the wind. At last, something appeared on the horizon. A small place, a wooden cabin, a lean-to stable, a fenced corral, and a well. Nothing impressive. But out here, it looked like an oasis carved from dust. Home sweet home, Colt muttered dryly. He dismounted and lifted her down, carrying her inside. The cabin was simple. A bed, a table, a cast-iron stove, shelves lined with supplies. But it was clean. Orderly. He laid her gently on the bed. Ayanna's eyes moved fast, taking everything in. Doors, corners, possible weapons, escape routes, instincts she couldn't turn off. You must be hungry, Colt said. He went to the cupboard, pulled out bread, dried beef, and some canned fruit. He put together a simple plate and brought it to her. Ayanna ate slowly, never taking her eyes off him. Colt sat across the room, giving her space. He lit a cigarette and stared out the window as the desert darkened. I figure you're wondering why I did this, he said after a while, not looking at her. Truth is, I don't rightly know myself. He took a drag, exhaled slowly. Maybe it's 'cause I know what it feels like to be alone, to have nobody want you around. He finally looked at her. There was something in his eyes, old pain, buried deep. My name's Colt Hayes, he said. 3 years ago, my wife, Mary Hayes, and my little girl, Elena Hayes, died from fever. His voice didn't break, but it came close. Been living out here ever since. Folks in town tolerate me 'cause I can handle cattle and shoot straight, but I got no friends, no family, just this patch of land and my horses. He paused, taking another slow drag. I saw it in your eyes. Same look I see every morning in the mirror. That look that says it don't matter if you live or die, but you keep breathing anyway, 'cause giving up feels worse than the pain. Ayanna listened in silence. She didn't catch every word, but she understood enough. The tone, the weight, the loneliness, those things didn't need translation. Don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring, Colt went on. Town will probably come knocking, looking for trouble. But tonight, you ain't alone in the desert. He stood, grabbed a blanket, and placed it over her. And I ain't alone in this house. Get some rest. Tomorrow's gonna be a long one. As Ayanna settled in, she watched him spread out a bedroll on the floor, leaving the bed for her. A small thing, but it meant something. She closed her eyes, still wary. But for the first time in days, something stirred inside her. hope. Outside, coyotes began their haunting song, and the stars burned cold and distant over the endless desert. Episode 3. The town talk's morning came too fast. Colt was already awake when the first sunlight cut through the windows. He stood by the stove, brewing coffee, the smell filling the small cabin. Ayanna woke with a start, instincts sharp, but eased slightly when she saw him doing nothing more than cooking. "Morning," Colt said, handing her a tin cup. She took it carefully, tasting the dark liquid. Bitter, but hot. Grounding. He cooked up eggs and bacon, more food than she had seen in weeks. They ate in silence, but Colt noticed something right away. Ayanna wasn't just sitting there. She was studying everything. The way he handled utensils, where he stored supplies, how the cabin was laid out. This wasn't idle curiosity. It was tactical awareness. She was mapping the space, learning it the way any seasoned warrior would. "I need to head into town today," Colt said at last. "Gotta pick up supplies." He paused, glancing at her. "I can leave you here with food and water, or you can come with me, but it won't be pleasant. Folks will talk." Ayanna locked her eyes on him. Then, without hesitation, she pointed towards the door. She was going. She wouldn't sit around hiding like something broken. Colt gave a slow nod, a trace of respect in his expression. "All right, but I'm telling you now, Red Springs ain't kind to outsiders, especially not Apache." An hour later, they were riding toward town. Colt had rigged a way to secure her to the saddle with soft rope so she wouldn't fall. Ayanna hated the feeling of being tied down, but she understood why it had to be done. Red Springs rose on the horizon. A strip of dust and wood stretched along a single street. A saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, a bank, the sheriff's office, and of course, the post office, where gossip traveled faster than any horse. The moment they rode in, everything stopped. Heads turned, conversations died. Men on the saloon porch froze mid-card game. Women stepping out of the general store went still, eyes wide. "Lord have mercy," one woman whispered. "Colt Hayes brought an Indian." "He's lost his damn mind." "What's he doing with her?" "Look at her. She can't even walk." The murmurs spread like wildfire. Colt kept his head up, ignoring every stare. He stopped outside the general store and dismounted. Carefully, he lifted Ayanna into his arms and carried her inside. The shopkeeper, Eli Turner, came rushing out, eyes wide as plates. "Colt? What in God's name?" "Morning, Eli," Colt said calmly, stepping past him. "I need supplies." Eli followed him, stumbling over his words. "Colt, you can't… she's Apache, for God's sake, and she's crippled." "I need flour, beans, coffee, sugar, canned meat," Colt cut in, ignoring him. "Bandages, alcohol, soap, plenty of it." He set Ayanna down carefully in a chair beside the counter. She stared straight at Eli, her dark eyes sharp, unreadable. The man instinctively took a step back. "I ain't serving you with that thing in here," Eli snapped, panic rising in his voice. Colt moved faster than a striking snake. He grabbed Eli by the front of his shirt and yanked him close. His voice dropped low, cold, dangerous. "She ain't a thing." Eli froze. "She's got a name," Colt continued. "Ayanna. And you're gonna treat her with respect, or I'll find another place to spend my money. You understand me?" Eli swallowed hard, nodding fast. Colt released him. Hands shaking, Eli hurried to gather the supplies. Word spread quick. By the time Colt finished, a small crowd had gathered outside. Among them stood Sheriff Grant Harker, older, gray mustache, badge catching the light. "Colt," the sheriff said, tired but firm. We need to talk." "Then talk," Colt replied, loading supplies onto his horse. "Not here, in my office, alone." Colt glanced at Ayanna. She gave the slightest nod. She could wait. He set her on the store's porch, where there was at least some shade, then followed the sheriff. Inside the office, Grant Harker shut the door and let out a long breath. "Colt, I've known you a long time. You're a good man. But this is madness." "What's so crazy about helping someone who needs it?" Colt shot back. "She's Apache," the sheriff said bluntly. "Her people have raided settlers, hit caravans, and now you bring her right into the heart of town. She can't even walk." Colt's voice stayed steady. "She ain't hurting anybody. It ain't just that." Harker rubbed his face, worn down. "People are scared, angry. You know how it goes." He paused, then added more quietly. "And Silas Kane. He's already looking for a reason to run you off your land. That gives Silas Kane all the excuse he needs," Sheriff Grant Harker went on. Silas Kane was the richest man in the county, the owner of the largest spread of land, with enough power to bend laws and buy men's loyalty. For months, he'd been after Colt Hayes's land. It sat right along the best stretch of river for miles. Colt had refused every offer. "Kane can go straight to hell," Colt said flatly. "Colt, listen to me," Harker pressed. "Take her back to her people, or leave her somewhere in Apache territory, but don't bring her here. This is only going to bring trouble." "She stays." The sheriff shook his head, worn down. "You're more stubborn than a mule. Just keep your gun close." When Colt stepped back outside, the sight that greeted him sent a cold edge through his chest. Ayanna was surrounded. A group of men had formed a loose circle around her on the porch. Saloon men. And among them stood Wade Cutter, his old partner, along with a few Kane riders. "Well now," Wade drawled with a crooked grin, "look what we got here. An Apache cripple. What's she to you, Colt? A pet?" Laughter broke out, loud, ugly. Ayanna didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed steady, unafraid. But Colt saw it. Her hands clenched tight in her lap, powerless to move. "Step away from her," Colt said, his voice low as steel, his hand drifting toward his revolver. "Easy there, hero," another man mocked. "We're just curious. What can this thing even do? She can't even stand." One of them, half drunk on morning whiskey, leaned in, reaching for Ayanna's hair. That was his mistake. Before his fingers even touched her, Ayanna moved. Fast, precise. She snatched a knife from his belt and pressed it hard against his wrist in one clean motion. The man froze. Even without her legs, her arms were iron, and she knew exactly where to cut to make a man bleed out in minutes. "She's crazy! Somebody help!" he shouted, panic cracking his voice. Colt crossed the distance in 2 strides, but he didn't disarm her. Instead, he stepped in beside her, revolver drawn, aimed square at the rest. "The next man who lays a hand on her deals with both of us," he said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. Silence dropped like a hammer. Even Wade Cutter took a step back. He recognized that look in Colt's eyes, the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Let's go, boys," Wade muttered at last. "Ain't worth it. Let Colt play house with his crippled pet. We'll see how that turns out." The men backed off, muttering threats under their breath as they drifted away. Colt didn't lower his gun until the last of them was gone. Then he turned to Ayanna. She still held the knife. Slowly, carefully, she let it fall. "Good move," Colt said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, she gave something back. Not quite a smile, but close. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Colt knew it the moment they left town. There was no going back now. Red Springs would never accept them. Silas Kane would use this against him. Trouble had only just begun. But as he rode, with Ayanna sitting in front of him, head high despite everything, he felt something settle deep in his chest. He'd made the right call. Some fights were worth taking, no matter the cost. The desert welcomed them back in silence, stretching endless and unforgiving, a witness to an unlikely bond that would soon be tested by fire. The weeks that followed were strange, tense. Colt and Ayanna fell into a quiet rhythm. Each morning he rode out to tend the cattle and horses. She stayed behind in the cabin. At first, she only watched from the window, frustration gnawing at her. She hated feeling useless. But slowly, that changed. Her arms were strong. She could drag herself across the floor using only her upper body. Little by little, she found ways to help. Cleaning, cooking, mending Colt's torn clothes. He never asked her to do any of it. But she needed to. Among the Red Sky people, everyone had a purpose. She refused to become a burden. One evening, Colt came home to find supper waiting. It wasn't much, just a simple stew, but it carried the scent of wild herbs she'd found near the well. He sat down, took a bite, and gave a short nod. "Good," he said. Something warm stirred in Ayanna's chest. Pride. It had been a long time since she felt that. At night, Colt started teaching her English, pointing at objects, saying their names. Ayanna learned fast, hungry to understand this new world. In return, she taught him Apache words. Shitty, my friend. Shikis, my brother. For a while, there was peace. But it was fragile, like glass laid over stone. One afternoon, Colt was out in the corral breaking a young colt when he saw it, a cloud of dust rising in the distance. 6 riders. He knew the man leading them before they even got close. Silas Kane. The man rode a black stallion, dark as midnight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed mustache and eyes cold as forged steel. His clothes were expensive, but the twin revolvers at his hips told the real story. He wasn't just rich. He was dangerous. Colt stepped forward as Kane pulled up a few yards away. His men fanned out behind him, forming a loose but threatening line. Among them stood Wade Cutter, that same crooked grin stretched across his face. "Kane," Colt said evenly, his voice calm as still water. "What brings you out here?" "Business, Hayes. Always business." Silas Kane dismounted smoothly, every movement polished, controlled. "I've come to make you an offer, a final offer for your land." "Told you before, it ain't for sale." Kane smiled, but there wasn't a shred of warmth in it. "Ah, but circumstances change, don't they?" His eyes drifted towards the cabin. "I hear you've taken in company, a crippled Apache woman." He chuckled softly. "Real charitable of you." Colt felt the anger rise, hot and sharp, but he held it down. "What I do on my land is my business." "Normally I'd agree," Kane said, strolling slowly around the corral like a predator sizing up its prey. "But this has become a matter of public safety." He stopped, turning back to Colt. "Folks are nervous. Some say you're planning something with that girl, bringing more Apache in, stirring up trouble." "That's nonsense, and you know it." "I do." Kane's gaze locked onto him. "But people are scared, Hayes, and scared people do stupid things." He paused, letting it hang. "Like burning down a ranch in the middle of the night." His voice dropped lower. "Would be a real shame if that happened here, especially with a helpless woman inside." The threat hung in the air, thin but deadly. Colt stepped forward, his hand drifting closer to his revolver. "If you or any of your men so much as touch her, I swear—" Kane cut him off, his smile vanishing. "You'll shoot me?" he said quietly. "I'm the most powerful man in this county, Hayes. I've got the sheriff in my pocket. Half this town owes me money, and I can pull together 20 armed men with a snap of my fingers." He leaned in just slightly. "You're one man, one cowboy, and a crippled Apache." A pause. "You don't stand a chance." Silence settled heavy between them, thick with restrained violence. Kane's men hovered near their guns, waiting for the slightest spark. From inside the cabin, Ayanna watched through the window. She didn't understand every word, but she understood enough. The posture, the tone, the danger. This man was the enemy, and Colt was standing in the fire because of her. "I'll give you 3 days," Kane said at last. 3 days to make the right decision. He turned toward his horse. "Sign over the land and leave. Take your Apache with you, and maybe you walk away breathing." He paused, glancing back with a cold edge. "Oh, and that offer I made before? $3,000? A faint smirk. "Now it's 2. Drops every day you make me wait." Kane mounted up. His men followed, riding off in a storm of dust. Colt stood there, unmoving, fists clenched so tight they trembled. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the glass. Ayanna watched him from the bed. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he never let his guard down. "Colt," she said softly, her English rough, uncertain. It was one of the first times she'd said his name. He turned to her. I go," she said, struggling for the words. No trouble." He understood. She was offering to leave, to give him his life back. No danger. No war. Colt shook his head without hesitation. "No, you stay." He searched for the words she had taught him. "Shitty, my friend." Something broke inside her then. Something hardened since the day her people abandoned her. This man, this stranger, was willing to lose everything for her, not out of pity, not out of duty, because he had decided she mattered. The next 2 days passed under growing tension. Colt reinforced doors and windows, checked every weapon twice. He taught Ayanna how to load and fire a rifle. She couldn't walk, but she could fight. And she learned fast. Her natural instinct as a hunter came roaring back to life. By the 3rd day, the air itself felt wrong. Too quiet. Colt knew Kane wouldn't come back empty-handed. Colt spent the entire day getting ready. He moved ammunition, checked every weapon twice, and made sure each window had a clean line of fire. By sundown, Ayanna was inside preparing what little they had for supper when she heard Colt curse under his breath outside. She dragged herself to the window, and her heart dropped. A line of riders stretched across the horizon. Not 6 this time. 15. Maybe more. Silas Kane hadn't come back alone. He'd brought an army. Colt burst through the door, slamming it shut and dropping the bar into place. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. "This is going to get ugly," he said, handing her a rifle. "Stay away from the windows unless you have to." He placed a revolver beside her. "And if it gets real bad," he added, meeting her eyes, "you know what to do." Ayanna nodded. She understood. It was the same choice her people had left her with in the desert. But this time, she wouldn't take the easy way out. This time, she would fight. Outside, the riders closed in, circling the house completely. Kane rode at the front, a torch burning in his hand. The firelight flickered across his face, turning him into something almost devilish. Colt Hayes, he shouted. Last chance. Come out with your hands up and the deed to that land. You can take your Apache and walk away alive. Colt cracked a window just enough, rifle ready. My answer's still no, Kane, he called back. This is my land. I'm not leaving. Then you'll die on it, Kane replied coldly. He lifted his hand. Burn it down, and if anyone comes out, shoot. Two of his men dismounted, torches in hand, moving toward the barn. Colt didn't hesitate. He took aim and fired. The first man dropped with a scream, clutching his leg. The second threw down his torch and scrambled back to his horse. They're firing! Return fire! Kane barked. Hell broke loose. Gunshots exploded in every direction. Bullets tore through the wooden walls, splintering beams and shredding anything in their path. Colt moved fast, shifting from one window to another, firing with deadly precision. Every shot mattered. He couldn't afford to miss. On the floor, Ayanna dragged herself toward the east window. 3 men were trying to slip in through a blind angle. She braced the rifle against the frame, took a slow breath, just like Colt had shown her, and pulled the trigger. The recoil jolted her hard, but her aim was true. 1 man dropped, the other 2 scattered, caught off guard. "The Apache's shooting!" one of them yelled. "She's crippled!" another shouted back, but his voice shook. Ayanna reloaded, fired again, and again. Her arms held steady. Years of drawing a bow had made them strong as iron. The rifle was just another weapon, and she was Apache, born for war. Colt heard her shots and felt something surge through him. Pride. She wasn't helpless. She was a fighter. Together they were holding off more than a dozen men. But Colt knew the truth. They couldn't keep this up forever. Sooner or later the ammunition would run dry, and all Kane needed was 1 man close enough with a torch. Then, something unexpected. Gunfire. But not aimed at them. It came from another direction. Colt risked a glance through the window, and his heart kicked hard in his chest. Sheriff Grant Harker. And behind him, a dozen armed men, town riders from Red Springs. Not all of them were Colt's friends, but they were decent men, and they'd had enough of Kane acting like he owned the law. "Cease fire!" Harker shouted. "Kane, this ends now. You're surrounded." Kane turned, scanning the situation fast. The element of surprise was gone, and now, for the first time, he was outnumbered. Rage twisted across his face, but he wasn't stupid. "This ain't over, Hayes," he shouted, spurring his horse. "It ain't over." His men followed, retreating fast, leaving behind the wounded, and 1 dead. Silence crashed down after the gunfire faded, heavy, ringing. Colt stepped out of the house slowly, rifle still in hand. Grant Harker dismounted and walked toward him. "You showed up just in time," Colt said. Harker nodded, tired. "Not everyone in Red Springs agrees with Kane's way of doing things. When we heard he was riding out here with his boys, some of us figured it was time to draw a line." He glanced toward the cabin, where Ayanna watched from the window. "That woman can shoot," he said. "Saw 2 of Kane's men drop from that side." Colt gave a small nod. "She can take care of herself." "Yeah." Grant Harker rubbed his chin, thinking it over. "Kane's gonna be back, Colt. You know how he is. Next time he'll be smarter." "I know," Colt said. "But now there are witnesses. He attacked my place without cause. That gives you something to work with." Harker nodded. "It ain't much, but it's something." He turned to the town riders. "All right, boys, let's move out. Let him get some rest." Before leaving, Harker paused and looked back at Colt. "My wife sent this." He handed over a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Bandages, medicine. She said if you're gonna be stubborn enough to keep that Apache woman here, You ought to have something to patch up the damage. Colt took the bundle, surprised. Tell Clara Boone I appreciate it. When they were gone, Colt stepped back inside. Ayanna was right where he'd left her, the rifle still in her hands. She was trembling slightly now, the adrenaline wearing off. Colt dropped to one knee beside her. You did good, he said quietly. Real good. Ayanna let the rifle slip from her hands. Then, to his surprise, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. She wasn't crying, but her body shook. She had killed men to defend this place, this strange piece of ground that had somehow become hers. Colt wrapped his arms around her gently, letting her breathe, letting her come back from it. Outside, the desert night stretched cold and silent, like nothing had happened. But they both knew the truth. This war had only just begun. And this time, they weren't alone. The days after the attack felt different. Red Springs split clean down the middle. On one side were the men loyal to Silas Kane, those tied to his money, his power. On the other were people who had seen enough, people who believed there was a line you didn't cross. And Kane had crossed it. Clara Boone, the sheriff's wife, small in stature but strong in will, started working quietly. She went door to door, talked to the women of the town. That man defended his home, she'd say, and that Apache woman stood beside him and fought. Ain't that what we all do? Protect what's ours? Not everyone agreed, but doubt had been planted. And it started to grow. Back at the ranch, life went on. Colt patched bullet holes in the walls. Ayanna learned more English every day. At night, they talked. Slow at first, then deeper, more personal. One evening, after supper, they sat with coffee between them. Ayanna looked at him and asked, her words still rough, "Why, you saved me?" Colt didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire in the stove for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "When my wife, Mary, and my girl, Elena, died," he said, "something in me broke. I kept going because I didn't know how to stop. Worked, ate, slept, but I didn't feel a damn thing." He looked up at her. "When I saw you out there in the desert, I saw myself, someone left behind, just waiting to die." He paused. "And I figured, if I couldn't save myself, maybe I could save you." Ayanna nodded slowly. She understood more than his words. "You save me," she said softly. "You save you too." Colt gave a faint, tired smile. "Yeah, I reckon that's true." She met his eyes, stronger now. "Colt, now I not burden. I warrior, always warrior." "I know," he said. "Saw it that first day. Been seeing it ever since." The following week brought trouble. Wade Cutter showed up in town, drunk on whiskey and bragging loud. "That Hayes and his Apache are gonna wish they'd taken Kane's deal," he laughed. "Boss has got something special planned." The sheriff didn't waste time. Grant Harker rode out to warn them. "I don't know exactly what Kane's planning," he said, "but he's gathering men, hard men, guns for hire from other territories." Colt felt a knot tighten in his gut. "How many?" "Don't know for sure, but more than we can handle." That night they prepared. Colt checked every weapon, cleaned every round. Ayanna practiced reloading until she could do it in the dark. They knew the truth. Kane had numbers, resources. All they had was will. But Ayanna had something more. Knowledge. "Colt," she said 2 nights later, her eyes sharp with something new. "No way. Apache way." Using broken English, gestures, and drawings scratched into the dirt, she explained. It wasn't about strength. It was about the land. Traps. Surprise. Turning the enemy's confidence against them. Colt listened, completely focused. The plan she laid out was brilliant, using every inch of the ranch, every blind spot, every assumption Kane's men would make. "You're a damn genius," Colt said, real admiration in his voice. Ayanna smiled, fully this time, teeth showing. "Apache, win when think," she said, "not just fight." The next few days were spent preparing. They dug shallow trenches and covered them with brush, set blind angles, built simple traps with rope and tin cans that would rattle if disturbed. Everything was quiet. Everything was ready. And they were waiting. Ayanna had even shown him how to send up smoke signals, subtle patterns that could confuse anyone watching from a distance. The attack came at dawn on the 7th day. This time Silas Kane didn't come himself. He sent his guns. 20 men armed to the teeth, hired killers, led by a cold, calculating man named Brock Hale. "Burn it all," Kane had ordered, "and if you find bodies in the ashes, even better." When the riders reached the ranch, something felt wrong. Too quiet. The house sat dark and still. No movement. No sound. The barn stood empty. "They ran," one of the gunmen muttered. "Cowards." But Brock Hale didn't buy it. He'd stayed alive this long by trusting his instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming. "Stay sharp," he ordered. "Spread out, check everything." That's when the first trap hit. One man stepped forward and snapped a hidden line. A storm of tin cans came crashing down from the rafters of the barn, rattling like thunder. Every man turned toward the noise, nervous, exposed. That was the moment Colt Hayes had been waiting for. From behind a cluster of rocks 50 yards out, he opened fire. The first shot dropped a man near the house. The second caught another in the shoulder. "We're under attack!" someone shouted. The black spurs scattered, diving for cover, firing wildly toward the flash of Colt's rifle. But Colt was already gone. He moved fast through the shallow trenches they'd dug, shifting position before the smoke even cleared. Then, gunfire from the opposite side. Ayanna. The attackers were caught in a crossfire. They didn't know how many enemies they faced, or where the next shot would come from. "It's just the cowboy and the cripple," one of them yelled. Just two. But two who knew every rock, every shadow, every inch of that land. Two who were fighting for something real, not money. Home. Brock Hale tried to rally his men, but chaos had already taken hold. Every time he pulled them together, gunfire came from somewhere new. The simple traps kept them on edge, jumping at every sound. Then came the boldest part of the plan. Ayanna lit 3 small fires in different spots around the ranch. From a distance, they looked like signals. The gunmen, already shaken, panicked. "There's more of them! It's a setup!" Fear spread fast. 3 men were already dead, 5 more wounded. The rest started backing toward their horses. Brock Hale tried to stop them, but when a bullet from Colt sliced past his ear, even he made the call. "Fall back! Fall back!" The hired guns broke. They ran, leaving behind the dead, the wounded, the fight. Silence fell hard once the last rider disappeared. Colt stepped out from cover slowly, rifle still raised. But there was no one left to shoot. They were gone. All of them. He moved fast toward Ayanna. She was still in position, breathing hard, her body trembling from the rush, but unhurt. Her eyes burned. Wild. Alive. They had done it. Against everything, they had won. "We did it," Colt said, almost disbelieving. Yeah, we did it. Ayanna let out a laugh, real, free, full of relief. Colt found himself laughing too, the weight of days lifting in that single moment. Victory. Shared. Earned. But neither of them was fooled. This wasn't over. Silas Kane was still out there. By the next day, the whole town knew. The surviving gunmen fled, spreading wild stories. Talk of a massive Apache ambush, dozens of warriors hidden in the hills. No one knew the truth. It had only been 2. Kane was furious. But worse than that, he was shaken. He'd lost men, money, and something far more dangerous, his reputation. People started asking questions. If one cowboy and a crippled Apache woman could beat him, just how powerful was Silas Kane, really? Sheriff Grant Harker didn't waste the opportunity. With the backing of some of the most respected folks in Red Springs, he filed formal charges against Kane for an unprovoked attack. It wasn't enough to put Silas Kane behind bars. He had too many lawyers, too much influence for that. But it was enough to stain his name. Enough to drag his reputation through the dirt. A week later, Kane rode out to Colt's ranch. Alone. No visible weapons. Colt met him with a rifle in hand anyway. I came to talk, Kane said calmly. Not to fight? Then talk fast, Colt replied. Kane walked the property slowly, his eyes tracing the bullet scars carved into the walls, then drifting to Ayanna, watching from the window. For the first time, something like respect flickered in his gaze. I underestimated you, he said at last. Both of you. He exhaled quietly. I figured you were just a soft-hearted cowboy, and she was nothing but dead weight. A pause. I was wrong. He glanced around once more. And I've decided your land isn't worth the trouble anymore. Plenty of other places. Plenty of other opportunities. He turned to leave, then stopped. But I'll give you one piece of advice, Hayes. His voice dropped, more serious now. This territory's changing. More settlers, more laws, more so-called civilization. His eyes shifted briefly toward Ayanna. A man living with an Apache woman. That's only going to get harder. He held Colt's gaze. Think about it. Then he rode off. And Colt knew. This time Kane meant it. The fight was over. He'd won, but the real question lingered. At what cost? And for how long? The months that followed brought quiet changes. Slow, steady. Clara Boone began visiting the ranch regularly, bringing food and medicine. She helped Ayanna improve her English, and in return, Ayanna showed her how to use herbs the way the Red Sky people did. Word spread. Other women from town started coming by. Curious at first, then more open. Not everyone in Red Springs accepted them. Some still looked with suspicion, some with quiet contempt. But they weren't alone anymore. They had allies now. People who respected them, not in spite of who they were, but because of it. One spring evening, nearly a year after Colt found Ayanna in the desert, they sat side by side on the porch. The sun was setting low, painting the sky in deep reds and gold. The horses grazed peacefully in the corral. For once, everything was still. Colt, Ayanna said, her English stronger now. Before, I think, I have no home, no family, no place. Colt glanced at her. And now? She looked around the ranch, then back at him, smiling. Now, I have home, I have family, I have place where I belong. Colt felt something tighten in his chest. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. The sun slipped below the horizon. Two broken souls, shaped by loss and pain, had found something neither of them had been looking for. Redemption. Purpose. And maybe, just maybe, something like happiness. No one had wanted the crippled Apache woman, until one lone cowboy had said, "She's mine now." And in those words, they both found their salvation. The desert had tested them with fire and blood, but they endured, together. And out here, in the wild frontier, that was all that mattered.